I'm Nora Bennett, 35, and the key to my first house is still warm in my hand when two cars roll into my driveway like they own the place. I can smell fresh paint through the open window lemon oil on the floors, and for one quiet breath, I believe this home is finally mine. Then my brother steps out with a grin and pops the SUV's trunk like a magician revealing a trick. Suitcases, boxes, a bag of kids' toys spill into the afternoon sun. My mother smooths her coat, looks past me at the little bungalow, and calls out cheerful and breathless, "We made it." The children tumble across the new lawn, chasing each other, with the kind of joy that never looks around for permission. My father cups a hand to his mouth and asks where to set things down, as if a plan had already been agreed. My mother walks right up the steps and with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes asks Nora, "Where do we sleep?" Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from in the comments and tap like and subscribe if you've ever had to guard something you worked years to build. I was raised in a small rental on the edge of Salem, Oregon, where the front door stuck in winter and every creak in the hallway gave itself away. My parents taught us to be polite in grocery lines, to return what we borrowed, and to say thank you, even when thank you felt small. Dad worked double shifts when I was little, and Mom clipped coupons into tidy stacks that looked like cards in a game we couldn't afford to lose. What they didn't say out loud, but we all understood, was that someone had to be steady, and it usually wasn't my brother. I learned to plan ahead, to keep a handwritten ledger of what came in and what could safely go out, and to make peace with waiting for good things instead of grabbing them before they were ready. By the time I finished college, life had turned practical and narrow in the way that keeps a person from falling through cracks. I rented rooms with thin walls, packed lunches in old containers, and skipped long weekends when friends headed to the coast. At first it felt temporary. Then it turned into a rhythm that made sense, one careful choice after another, watching a small savings account inch forward. I sketched floor plans at the kitchen table and kept a list of houses that were within reach, not the kind people showed off, just the kind that could hold a life. When I landed steady work with a local builder, the idea of a home with my name on the deed stopped sounding like daydream talk and started sounding like a promise I could keep. Family never meant unkindness in our house, but it did mean gravity, and the pull was strongest around my brother. Tyler is charming and quick and has always been first to suggest how things should go when they're not going his way. If a deadline slipped, we shifted the conversation. If a bill came due, we found a way to make it gentle. I don't remember anyone deciding this openly, but I became the person who made room, who worked late, who nodded through other people's plans. When I passed the mortgage pre-approval, I shared the news at Sunday dinner, bright with relief, and my mother clapped her hands and said, "Finally our new home." She meant it kindly, as though the word "our" had always been there, and the table moved on to potato salad like nothing extraordinary had been said. There's a difference between what you can explain and what you can feel, and that night I felt a split I couldn't name. I tried to shake it off on the drive back to my apartment, telling myself it was just excitement talking, that of course they were proud, that of course they understood. I let myself imagine paint colors and the way morning light might fall across a small dining room if I chose a house with east-facing windows. I pictured a single set of plates and a quiet corner for books and a front step where I could sit with coffee and hear sprinklers down the block. I told myself it would be fine, and in that moment I believed it. The bungalow I found in Bend wasn't flashy. It was honest. 3 bedrooms, a modest yard, a line of river stones edging the little garden bed by the porch. I signed with careful hands and called Dana from the parking lot, my voice shaky in the way joy can be when it's earned. The first night I stood in the empty living room and listened to the house breathe, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the soft click of the thermostat, the sound of my own shoes on clean floors. It was the kind of quiet that makes a person taller without anyone needing to see. I told my parents the closing date because it felt right to share it, not because I wanted anyone to make it theirs. I sent the address with a small photo of the porch and thought that would be the news for the day. My plan for that Saturday was simple: drop a few boxes, check the locks, wipe down shelves, and take a picture by the front door to remind myself that beginnings can arrive on time. I set a grocery bag on the counter and opened the windows to the pine-sweet air, and for a long minute it felt like everything had finally lined up. The sound of engines broke that spell, first one car and then the next, pulling up nose to tail like a moving crew. Doors opened, voices carried, and there was my brother waving as if we'd discussed it all last night. My mother called me honey twice in the space of a breath and reached for the doorknob with the ease of habit. Boxes thumped on the walk, a suitcase tipped and rolled, and my father lifted his chin to ask which room would be best for the kids. I held the key, the actual key with my name on the deed behind it, and looked at the faces I have loved my whole life. My mother smiled kindly and certain and said, "Nora, where do we sleep?" My mother's question hung in the air, her eyes flicking past me toward the open front door as if the answer should have been obvious. My father lifted a heavy box from Tyler's trunk and motioned toward the porch with his chin waiting for my approval. Tyler tugged a suitcase onto the curb with the easy confidence of someone sure the matter was settled, while Rachel balanced Caleb on her hip, her expression weary from the long drive. The children darted across my small yard, flattening the tender grass. I had only just seeded their laughter, carrying over the sound of car doors slamming shut. I gripped the house key tighter, the sharp metal edges pressing into my palm, and asked quietly, "What is all this?" Carol smiled as though humoring me, lowering her voice to a hushed tone. "Well, we've come to move in." "Of course," she said, her hand fluttering toward the house. "But Nora, where do we sleep?" She glanced around the modest bungalow, her brows pulling together as if she had miscalculated its size. Behind her, Tyler dragged another box to the walkway, his voice cutting across mine. "Don't play dumb, Nora. We've been planning this for months." His words rattled something loose inside me. I remembered the Sunday dinner a few weeks earlier when I had shared the news of my mortgage approval. My parents had both clapped with relief, and my mother had said, "Finally, our new home." The word had caught me, but the conversation had moved quickly. Tyler had pulled out his phone, scrolling through listings of houses far larger than anything I could afford, boasting of schools and backyards that could fit a trampoline. At the time, I had stayed silent, telling myself it was just talk, that everyone would understand the truth eventually. Now, with their cars filling my driveway and boxes stacked in my yard, it was clear they had not misunderstood at all. They had built their future on a plan I had never agreed to. "This is my home," I said, forcing my voice to steady. "I bought it for myself." My mother's laugh was quick, a little sharp at the edges. "Don't be ridiculous," she replied. She gestured toward my father, who was now easing a box down on the porch. "Your father already gave notice at work." The weight of her words landed like a stone. My father stood there, his back straight, but his jaw tight, as if daring me to challenge the decision. I felt the ground tilt under me, everything I had worked for, suddenly uncertain. 9 years of saving, of missed vacations, of hand-me-down furniture, of second jobs and early mornings, all so I could finally unlock a front door that belonged only to me. And now, without a single conversation, they had decided it belonged to them. Tyler stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the porch, his voice pitched low, as though we were children again, conspiring in the dark. "If you don't help your own family, who will?" His hand gripped my shoulder, the pressure too familiar, the same trick he used when convincing me to take blame for things he had broken. Behind him, Rachel shifted uncomfortably, keeping her eyes on the kids who were now chasing each other around the porch steps. My father's tone cut through the noise. "Nora, your brother gave up his apartment and the children are already enrolled in school here." He spoke with the same edge that had once preceded punishment when we were small, the same unyielding certainty that made it pointless to argue. I stared at the key in my hand at the doorway behind me, leading to empty rooms I had pictured filled with my own life. For years I had been the steady one, the responsible one, while Tyler stumbled from one failed venture to another, and here I was again, expected to carry the weight of everyone else's choices. I swallowed hard and lifted my chin. "Your plans are not mine," I said, the words coming out firmer than I expected. My mother's smile faltered, her hand falling to her side. My father stopped where he was, his eyes narrowing as if he'd heard something dangerous in my tone. Tyler shifted closer, his voice heavy with impatience. "She's pretending she didn't promise to help us." "I never promised," I said, meeting his eyes. The children's laughter quieted as they sensed the tension between the adults. For a moment, no one moved, the only sound the low hum of a car engine cooling in the driveway. I felt my pulse quicken, but I did not step aside. It was a strange thing to stand there with the key to my own home in hand and feel the weight of everyone else's expectations pressing against me. Their boxes stood ready, their bags unpacked, their lives already shifted in anticipation of my surrender. The yard I had dreamed of planting flowers in now looked like a staging ground for someone else's arrival. My father's voice broke the silence, steady but impatient. "Let's get everything inside before dark." I took a slow breath and squared my shoulders, holding onto the doorframe like an anchor. "This is my house." I repeated my words, quiet but clear. My mother's face stiffened, her eyes narrowing as if she could will me into compliance. My father's jaw tightened, waiting for me to fold. Tyler's hand lingered on my shoulder, but I did not move. The weight of their disappointment pressed in the familiar threat of being labeled the difficult one, the selfish one, the daughter unwilling to carry the family's burden. But standing there on that porch with the house behind me and their boxes at my feet, I felt something shift inside, like a fault line settling into place. For the first time, I wondered if I had the courage to hold the line. That night, long after they finally left in silence, the echo of the confrontation followed me into every room. The kitchen felt colder, the living room smaller, the walls holding a tension I had not imagined when I first dreamed of this space. My phone buzzed with a new email notification, and I expected work messages waiting to be answered. Instead, the subject line made my breath catch. "Morgan Family Dream Home Purchase Agreement Ready." I opened the message with trembling hands, scanning quickly, until I saw my own name listed as the primary applicant, the loan paperwork already in motion. My stomach lurched as I read the words "as requested by Carol Bennett on behalf of Nora Bennett." A $2,000 hold had already been placed using my payment information. The room spun as I sank onto a half-empty box, my hand clutching the printouts I had begun pulling from my accounts. Page after page confirmed what I feared: my identity, my credit, my future used without my permission. It wasn't just an assumption now. It was theft dressed up as family planning. The doorbell rang an hour later, sharp and insistent. And when I opened it, my parents and Tyler stood there again, arranged like they had rehearsed their roles. My mother sifted through my mail as though it were hers. My father glanced at his watch as if the timing of my panic inconvenienced him, and Tyler paced with the calm of someone who had never heard the word no. "You look awful," my mother said flatly. "Have you been sleeping?" I held up the email printout, my voice steady. "You used my name without permission." She dismissed it with a wave. "Don't be dramatic, Nora. I simply initiated the process. You would have been consulted before anything was finalized." The bitterness rose in my throat as Tyler leaned against my kitchen counter, his tone smooth and practiced. "Strong words for family, helping family." I looked down at the papers in my hand, then back at them. "How exactly were you helping me by making me responsible for a house I never agreed to buy?" My father finally spoke, his tone sharp. "It's an investment. The schools there are excellent," my mother added quickly. "We've already enrolled the kids." The words hit like a slap. They had built a life on the assumption of my sacrifice, and they were already living in it. I gathered the papers into a neat stack and placed them firmly on the counter. "This stops now," I said. But my mother's eyes glistened with rehearsed tears, and my father's mouth tightened as if preparing another argument. Tyler folded his arms, watching me with the same expression he used to wear before daring me to take the blame for something broken. Their voices rose around me, layered with guilt and demand, but I stood still, the key to my home burning in my pocket. And even as they filled the room with reasons and rehearsed lines, one truth settled deep in my chest. This was no misunderstanding. It was a plan built and executed without me, and I was the last to know. I didn't yet realize how far they would go to make me bend, but standing there that night, surrounded by boxes and betrayal, I knew the real fight had only just begun. The phone call started the next morning. First it was a number I didn't recognize, then another, both going silent when I let them ring through. By midday, I had 5 missed calls, all from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. My brother had posted something online about a family crisis, and before long the story had taken on a life of its own. By evening, cousins and old acquaintances were sending me messages urging me to do the right thing, as though they knew what that meant. The landline rang too, the number I kept for emergencies, and I picked up without thinking. My grandmother's voice filled the line, wavering with practiced fragility. "Nora, I don't understand what's happening. Tyler says you've left them with nowhere to go." I pressed the receiver tighter to my ear, my stomach twisting. "That's not true." I tried to explain, but she spoke over me, her tone turning sharper. "I've always included you equally in my will, but family takes care of family. I never thought you'd be so selfish." When the line went dead, I stood frozen, the words echoing louder than the silence that followed. I sat on the kitchen floor with my knees pulled close, the stack of documents spread across the tiles around me. The email from the realtor, the loan application with my name, the charge against my account, each piece laid out like evidence in a trial. But the real weight pressing on me came from older memories I hadn't wanted to revisit. I saw myself at 21 opening my tuition account near the end of senior year, only to find the balance emptied. I could still hear my mother's voice on the phone, casual, as if she were describing the weather. "We had to help Tyler with the coffee shop. You'll figure something out. You always do. That coffee shop closed within months, leaving me scrambling to work 60-hour weeks while finishing my degree." I ate instant oatmeal in a tiny studio apartment, my body running on caffeine, and the stubborn refusal to quit. That night, staring at the withdrawal slip with her name on it, I made a vow that I whispered to my own reflection in the bathroom mirror, "Never again." For 9 years, I had kept that promise. I brown-bagged lunches, drove a car older than I cared to admit, and said no to trips and dinners out. I tucked away 65% of every paycheck, building a wall between myself and vulnerability brick by brick. And now, in one thoughtless act, they had tried to climb that wall without asking if it was even theirs to touch. My phone buzzed on the counter, and I reached for it with the heaviness of dread. Instead of another cousin's name, I saw Rachel's. Her message was short. "I understand why you said no. I would have done the same." I read it 3 times, the glow of the words almost foreign after days of pressure and guilt. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind me that I wasn't losing my mind. That evening, the knock at my apartment door was sharp and insistent. When I opened it, my parents and Tyler stood framed in the hall, their faces set with determination. My father crossed his arms, his voice low and measured. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." My mother began pacing the living room, picking up my belongings and setting them down again, as if rearranging my life would make her argument stronger. Tyler lingered by the window, his presence filling the space like a warning. I crossed to the bookshelf and pulled down 3 photo albums, carrying them to the coffee table. I flipped open the first, my high school graduation, staring back. "You had that fishing trip, remember?" I turned the page to my college scholarship ceremony. Tyler had a baseball game that day. I turned more pages, my first art show, a design award, the promotion party Dana had thrown when they said the drive was too far. Each page I turned, my voice grew steadier. Finally, I closed the album and looked at them. "This is what you've done for me. You've taught me I'm only valuable when I'm useful to you." My mother's face pinched her hands, fidgeting with the hem of her blouse. My father shifted his weight but didn't speak. Tyler opened his mouth ready to argue, but the doorbell interrupted him. When I opened it, Dana stood there holding 2 empty boxes and a roll of packing tape. She took in the room with one glance and stepped inside, ignoring Tyler's attempt to block her path. "Ready for the next load?" she asked, as if my family weren't standing there at all. "We're not finished," Tyler said quickly, his voice tight. Dana brushed past him, stacking dishes into the box with efficient movements. "Nora and I have a schedule," she replied. "The truck's only rented until 7. The contrast was stark, my family demanding sacrifice, while my friend showed up simply to support me. The silence stretched, my mother finally breaking it with a plea. "We need to resolve this." "There's nothing to resolve," I answered, surprised at how steady I sounded. "The house is mine." I didn't add anything else. No apology, no softening, just the truth. They exchanged looks, my father's brows drawn together, my mother's lips pressed thin. Tyler restless by the window. Finally, Tyler said quickly, "We can discuss options tomorrow at your new place." They thought they were buying time that I would bend with enough pressure. What they didn't realize was that the decision had already been made. I nodded, watching them file out their relief visible as though they believed I had yielded. But the truth was different. My furniture was already delivered, the utilities switched to my name, the house set up for me alone. I walked them to the door, Dana at my side, and as it closed behind them, the lock clicked with finality. The night settled heavy around me, but in the quiet, I felt something new take shape. For years, I had been the one to adjust to make room to bear the weight of decisions I didn't make. Now, for the first time, I felt the ground firm under my feet. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but I knew this much: the answer was still no. And when the morning light streamed through the windows of my bungalow, filling the rooms I had claimed for myself, I understood that the real test had only begun. The knock on my apartment door came again just after sunset. When I opened it, my parents and Tyler stood in the hall, their faces tight with determination. My father crossed his arms as though bracing for a fight, while my mother moved past me without asking, her eyes scanning the room, like she had already decided what to rearrange. Tyler stayed by the window, pacing slowly, his hand brushing across the blinds with restless energy. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled down 3 photo albums I had kept since childhood, setting them carefully on the coffee table. I opened the first to my high school graduation photo, where I stood in a cap and gown, with no one beside me. "You had that fishing trip, remember?" I said quietly, turning the page. The next showed my college scholarship ceremony. Tyler had a baseball game that day. Each page revealed another moment when I had stood alone, a series of milestones marked by absence instead of presence. My first art show, a design award the promotion celebration Dana hosted that my parents said was too far to drive. My voice grew steadier as I turned the last page and closed the book. "This is what you've done for me. You've taught me I'm only valuable when I'm useful." My mother's face wavered, her lips parting, but no words coming. My father's gaze shifted to the floor, as if he'd been caught in a memory he couldn't argue against. Tyler started to speak, but the doorbell cut him off. I opened the door to find Dana standing there with 2 empty boxes and a roll of tape. She looked past me into the room, took in the tension with one glance, and stepped inside. Ready for the next load, she asked, her voice calm, her eyes on me. Tyler moved to block her, his voice sharp. "We're not finished here." Dana sidestepped him, her presence steady as she bent to start packing dishes into a box. "Nora and I have a schedule," she said. "The truck's only rented until 7. The contrast between her quiet efficiency and my family's demands made the air feel different in the room. My mother stopped pacing and looked at me, her voice soft but insistent. "We need to resolve this." I straightened, the words rising without hesitation. "There's nothing to resolve. The house is mine." The sentence hung there, simple and unshaken. My parents exchanged uneasy glances, Tyler's jaw tightening as he paced. My father finally said, "We can talk tomorrow at your new place." Relief flickered across their faces, as though they believed I had agreed to compromise. What they didn't know was that my furniture had already been delivered, the utilities in my name, the bungalow arranged for one person only. When they left, Dana and I packed in silence, the only sound the rip of tape sealing boxes. As the door closed behind my family, I felt a shift inside me, as though the ground I had been standing on finally held. For years I had adjusted to their expectations, but now I felt the steady weight of a different kind of choice. The next morning, light streamed through the bungalow windows, painting the hardwood floors in rectangles of gold. I placed a vase of sunflowers on the dining table, their yellow petals catching the morning sun. On the wall near the entryway, I hung my college diploma, no longer hidden in a drawer, but framed where anyone could see it. Every item in the house felt deliberate, chosen for me and no one else. My phone buzzed with a message from Dana. They on their way, I sent back a single thumbs up and set the phone aside. The doorbell rang minutes later, and I counted to 5 before opening it. My mother stepped inside first, her eyes moving over the furnished room. My father followed, his brows rising in surprise at how complete it looked. Tyler brushed past them, his gaze landing on the leather chair angled beneath the window. "Where's the space for our stuff?" he asked. "There isn't any," I said evenly. Would you like some coffee? I just made a pot. The steadiness in my voice seemed to catch them off guard. Tyler looked at our parents, waiting for one of them to speak. My father's eyes moved to the blueprints framed above the fireplace, the lines of my first independent project displayed like a declaration. While my mother examined the cabinets in the kitchen, Tyler slipped outside. Through the window, I saw him approach Henry, who was watering roses in his yard. Tyler gestured toward my house, his smile broad. "We're moving in this weekend. Nora's been so generous to let us stay." Henry straightened water dripping from his can. "Really? That's not what Nora told me. She showed me her plans, said it was her first place all to herself, even showed me the paperwork from the HOA. Tyler stiffened, turning to find Rachel standing nearby, arms crossed, her expression hard. "You told me," she agreed, she said. Tyler's reply stumbled, his confidence faltering. I closed the window gently and turned back to my mother, who was still moving jars on the shelf, as though she might claim the space by arranging it. Before I could speak, the doorbell rang again. I opened it to find Dana holding a flat package wrapped in brown paper. "Surprise," she said brightly. "I couldn't wait to give you your housewarming gift." My mother's head snapped up. Housewarming. We weren't told about a party. Dana set the package on the table and tore away the paper, revealing a doormat with bold lettering, "Nora's Home." She held it up for everyone to see. Perfect for the porch, since this is officially Nora's home. The silence that followed pressed into every corner of the room. Tyler walked back in with Rachel behind him, his confidence now reduced to a stiff shuffle. My father cleared his throat, his voice less certain. "Perhaps we should discuss alternative arrangements." Rachel spoke before Tyler could stop her. "What about that apartment complex on Riverside, the one with 3 bedrooms starting at $1,800? Tyler's eyes cut toward her, but she didn't flinch. "That's not the point," he muttered. Rachel's tone stayed firm. She bought this for herself. My mother sat heavily on a stool at the counter, her hand pressing against the pearl necklace at her throat. "But what about the house we put a hold on? We'll lose the deposit." My father cut her off. "We should talk about this in the living room. Nora needs to make her decision clear." I nodded, gesturing toward the couch and chairs I had arranged with care. As they filed in, Dana gave me a small thumbs up, her eyes steady on mine. I followed them, the words already forming in my chest, ready to be spoken. And as I sat down across from my family, the weight of their assumptions still heavy in the air, I knew the next words would set the tone for everything that came after. We gathered in the living room, my parents taking the couch, Tyler pacing behind them like he was leading a presentation, and Dana settling quietly in the corner. My mother leaned forward, her fingers twisting the strand of pearls around her neck. "Nora, be reasonable. We're not asking for much, just your signature. Co-sign the loan, that's all." My father nodded. His smile stretched thin. "You keep this place a starter home and we'll get a house that fits the whole family." His words landed like he was offering a solution, not a demand. Tyler stopped pacing long enough to stand directly across from me, his arms folded. "Family duty isn't optional. You can't just walk away from us." His voice sharpened, carrying the same edge he used to use when cornering me as a child. "And if you refuse, you're cutting yourself off from this family. Is that really what you want to be alone?" For a moment, the old panic rose, the fear of being the difficult one, the selfish one. But then my eyes moved around the room, the framed blueprints above the fireplace, the books I had placed carefully on the shelves, the sunlight catching the edge of the vase on the table. My house. My choice. I stood slowly and walked to the secretary desk in the corner, pulling a folder free. Their eyes followed me as I returned to stand in front of them. "I've been financially independent since college," I said, my voice steady. My mother's hand flew to her throat in practiced defense. "We supported you," she began. I cut her off, sliding a stack of papers onto the coffee table. "You drained my tuition account to fund Tyler's coffee shop. Senior year spring semester. I worked 2 jobs to finish my degree." My father shifted uncomfortably, muttering, "That was an investment in your brother's future." I met his eyes. "And what about mine?" I opened the folder wider, showing bank statements lined up in order. 9 years of saving, 65% of every paycheck. No vacations, lunch from home every day, no streaming subscriptions, no new clothes unless necessary. That's how I afforded this house, not by using anyone else's name or credit. Tyler scoffed, his tone dripping with disdain. What, you want a medal for being boring, for having no life? My answer came quickly. I have a life. One I built piece by piece. I turned to my mother. You say I'm betraying the family. I'm not betraying anyone. I'm just done betraying myself. The silence that followed was heavy-charged, like the space between lightning and thunder. Tyler broke it with a snap in his voice. This is ridiculous. We've given notice on our apartment. The kids are already enrolled in school here. Dad quit his job in Portland. You can't just back out now. I took a breath and let the words fall into place. Your poor planning isn't my emergency. Saying it felt foreign and right all at once. My mother narrowed her eyes. We raised you better than this. I considered her words carefully. Maybe you did. You raised me to work hard to honor my commitments to be responsible. That's exactly what I'm doing now. I walked to the front door and pulled it open, the evening air rushing in cool and sharp. From my pocket, I pulled the spare key I had found tucked in my mother's purse the day before, a copy made without asking. I placed it on the entryway table with a quiet click. You don't get to decide what my success looks like. You don't get to claim what I've earned as communal property. Tyler's face shifted from disbelief to anger. After everything we've done for you. This is my home. I interrupted, my voice firm. Bought, earned, and chosen by me. My mother stood trembling slightly. How can you be so selfish? Family helps family. I nodded slowly. Yes, they do. But help isn't the same as sacrifice. Help isn't the same as exploitation. I stepped aside, the door open behind me, an invitation clear as words. I'm not asking you to leave my life, just my house. One by one, they filed past my father first, his eyes fixed on the ground. Tyler followed, jaw tight, his footsteps clipped. My mother lingered, reaching for my hand. Nora, she whispered, her voice small. Please. I looked at her, really looked, and saw not the unshakable matriarch of my childhood, but a woman who had never learned how to stand without leaning on someone else. I love you, I said gently. But this answer is still no. I closed the door behind them, not with anger, but with finality. The lock slid into place, and I leaned my forehead against the cool wood, breathing in the quiet that filled the house once more. The night stretched long, the silence broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock on the wall. Yet for the first time, the silence didn't feel like a burden. It felt like mine. And in that stillness, I understood that the boundary had been set and the real consequences would soon follow. The weeks that followed felt both quiet and uncertain. My phone stayed silent, no calls from my parents, no sudden drop-ins from Tyler. For a while, the absence pressed on me like punishment, but slowly it shifted into something else. The stillness left space to breathe, to hear my own footsteps echo through the rooms without expecting interruption. Each morning I opened the curtains and let the light spill across the hardwood floors, reminding myself this house was mine alone. Through the neighborhood grapevine, I learned Tyler and Rachel had found a rental across town, a small place with 2 bedrooms for 5 people. It wasn't spacious, but it was theirs. I pictured the children squeezed into one-room toys spilling into the hallway, Rachel balancing the day-to-day with her usual quiet determination. It sounded like a tight fit, but also like a start they hadn't planned for, yet couldn't avoid. I didn't hear directly from my parents for over a month. The silence stretched long enough that I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. Then on a late afternoon, a message appeared from Rachel. Attached was a photo Tyler painting the living room of their rental a roller dripping with pale yellow paint, while Mia and Jonah added their own streaks of color beside him. Caleb sat in the middle of the floor with a toy truck leaving streaks of dust in his wake. Underneath, her words read, "Thank you. I think we needed this reset more than we knew." I stared at the photo for a long time, trying to decide what to make of it. The children's messy laughter showed through the image, a moment of real life in motion. My finger hovered over the reply button, though no words came easily. Whatever shift had begun in their home, it wasn't my responsibility to shape it. Meanwhile, my own life began to fill with the kind of community I hadn't expected. Dana visited often, carrying plants for the porch or small household items she thought I might need. Henry stopped by with advice about the rose bushes and stories about when he built his own fence years ago. Neighbors waved when I walked to the mailbox, their greetings warm and easy. Slowly, my house felt less like a fortress I had to defend, and more like a place that welcomed life in gentle ways. 3 months into living there, I invited a small circle of friends for dinner. We gathered in the living room, plates balanced on our knees, laughter bouncing off the walls. Dana raised her glass in a toast. To Nora, she set her smile wide, who showed us all that saying no can be the beginning of something beautiful. This time, I didn't deflect or lower my eyes. I lifted my own glass and let the warmth of her words settle around me. Along one wall, I had created a gallery of milestones, my architecture degree photos from solo hiking trips, a certificate from my first professional award. Each frame hung without apology, none of them crowded by obligation or diminished by someone else's claim. Janet, an artist in her 70s, who had recently become a neighbor and friend, leaned back in her chair and admired the wall. "You've created something special here," she said softly. The word created felt like it fit, as if all those years of saving and sacrifice had been about more than just money. Later that night, as I hung the final photograph, a picture of my front door on closing day, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. My mother's name lit the screen. For a moment, I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me shifted and I answered. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "Nora, I was wondering if I might visit sometime next week. Just me." I paused, the old reflex to rearrange my life flickering before fading away. "Tuesday evening would work," I said, my tone steady. "I have meetings until 6, so any time after that is fine. Just dinner, though. I have an early client presentation Wednesday." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Finally, she said, "Tuesday at 6:30 then." We ended the call with simple confirmation, no pleading, no apology, just an agreement. When I set the phone down, I didn't feel the old tension twisting in my stomach. Instead, I felt the weight of boundaries holding steady. For the first time in years, a meeting with my mother would happen on terms I set. That weekend, my backyard filled with people who had become my chosen circle. Rachel sat at the patio table watching her children chase each other along the garden path. She had left Tyler a month earlier, a decision that brought her into what Dana jokingly called the Boundary Brigade. Henry brought a basket of herbs. Janet arrived with strawberry shortcake, and a neighbor from across the street carried in a potted plant for the porch. As the sun sank into wide strokes of orange and purple glasses were raised, Rachel lifted hers with quiet certainty. "To new beginnings," she said, "and boundaries worth keeping." The evening stretched warm and easy, the sound of children's laughter mixing with the clink of glasses. I looked around at the faces gathered in my backyard and realized I wasn't alone, not in the way my brother had tried to make me fear. The house was mine, yes, but so was the life unfolding around it. As Tuesday drew closer, I felt no panic, only a calm curiosity. The doorbell would ring, and my mother would step into this space not as its assumed owner, but as a guest. Whatever words came next, I was ready. Tuesday evening arrived with a steady calm I hadn't expected. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to find my mother standing there holding a small box of cinnamon cookies. She hesitated on the porch until I stepped aside. For the first time, she didn't walk in as though the house already belonged to her. She waited until I gestured her forward, and only then did she cross the threshold. We sat at the dining table, the plate of cookies between us. She traced the rim of her coffee cup, her wedding ring tapping softly against the porcelain. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, she glanced around the room and said quietly, "This is a lovely home, Nora." The words were careful, almost unpracticed, but they carried a weight I hadn't heard from her in years. Dinner was simple, just a casserole I had prepared earlier, but it gave us something to focus on besides the silence. My mother asked about my work, and I told her about a new project downtown. She nodded, her hands folded neatly in her lap as though listening was an act she was relearning. The conversation moved slowly, but it moved, and that was enough. Over the next weeks, I saw the ripple effects of everything that had happened. Tyler stayed in the rental balancing work, and the children, while Rachel began charting her own course. She visited often, bringing the kids to play in the yard, their laughter spilling over the fence. Rachel spoke of interviews and possibilities, her voice steadier with each visit. She no longer looked like someone carrying the weight of decisions made for her. Through neighbors and mutual acquaintances, I heard that my parents had stopped speaking so often about the house they thought would be theirs. Instead, they had begun mentioning smaller plans, talk of a downsized place nearer to their circle of friends in Portland. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of what had happened, but it was a step away from pretending the bungalow was ever meant to be theirs. Inside, my own home life took on a rhythm that felt like it belonged only to me. I hosted dinners with Dana, afternoons with Janet discussing art, and evenings where Henry dropped by with gardening advice. Each gathering reinforced the difference between being surrounded by people who respected boundaries and those who ignored them. My house was no longer a place to defend. It was a place where I could rest, create, and welcome those who came in honesty. One afternoon, Rachel arrived with the children carrying a potted herb garden. She placed it on the patio and smiled. "For your kitchen," she said. "Fresh basil, mint, and thyme. You've done so much for me without asking for anything." I wanted to give something back. Her gesture was small but carried a depth that lingered. Later that evening, I set the herbs by the window, their scent filling the air while I cooked. Not every moment was simple. My grandmother June called once more, her tone still edged with disappointment. "I don't understand why you turned your back on family," she said. I explained again calmly that I hadn't. I told her my door was always open for visits, but my home would never be taken without my consent. The line was quiet for several seconds before she murmured, "Perhaps I don't see things the way you do." It wasn't agreement, but it wasn't a threat either. It felt like the beginning of a pause. As weeks turned to months, the changes around me settled into something steady. Rachel filed for separation and joined the circle of women who gathered in my backyard for dinners and laughter. My parents remained more distant than before, but the absence no longer stung. The house stood as proof that boundaries could be kept, even when the cost was steep. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I stepped out onto the porch and looked at the doormat Dana had given me months earlier. The lettering was still clear, Nora's home. Beyond the porch, the neighborhood was quiet, the hum of sprinklers carrying across the lawns. For the first time, I didn't wonder what my family might try next. I knew the line had been drawn and it would hold. Yet as I closed the door behind me, I felt something stir. Not fear this time, but curiosity. The fractures in my family had left gaps, and I wasn't sure whether they would remain or be rebuilt in some new form. What I did know was this: whatever came next, it would happen on ground I had claimed as mine. The evening of my mother's visit ended more gently than I ever imagined. She sat across from me at the table, the last of the cinnamon cookies resting on a plate between us. She didn't rearrange my kitchen or criticize the modest size of the rooms. She simply sipped her coffee and let the quiet stretch. Before she left, she looked around one last time, her voice low but steady. "This is a lovely home, Nora. It wasn't everything I had longed to hear, but it was real, and that was enough." Life moved forward with a rhythm that finally felt my own. Rachel settled into her new chapter with a calm I hadn't seen in her before. She brought the children often, their laughter carrying through my backyard as they darted between rows of herbs she had planted by the patio. When they left in the evenings, the house echoed with the reminder of what true family sounded like, care that didn't demand repayment. My parents remained more distant, their calls fewer, their words careful. I didn't mistake that distance for repair, but I accepted it for what it was. Some bridges don't rebuild to their old shape. They must stand in new designs or not at all. I no longer lived in fear of their expectations. My home stood as proof that I could hold firm and still offer love, even if that love now had boundaries marked by doors that only opened when I chose. The neighborhood became its own circle of belonging. Dinah came often, her laughter filling the rooms, as if she had lived there all along. Henry checked in, proud of the roses blooming along the fence line he had advised me to build. Janet hung one of her small paintings on my wall, a gift she said matched the light of my living room. These people celebrated milestones with me without asking to own them, and I realized that found family can be as steady and real as blood. One afternoon, while sorting through mail at the entryway, I paused to look at the doormat Dana had given me. Nora's home was still printed clear, a quiet reminder of the promise I had kept to myself. I had said no when it mattered most, and the life growing inside these walls was proof of why that answer had been necessary. In time, I even let myself soften toward my parents. My mother's visits became occasional, brief, and measured. She still carried habits of glancing at my cabinets or commenting on the size of the yard, but now she caught herself before stepping too far. Each time she left, she waited at the door until I hugged her, as though learning the shape of a new balance between us. My father spoke less, his pride tucked away behind silence, but sometimes silence is its own kind of peace. I think about that vow I made in college, staring at my reflection after discovering my tuition account had been drained. Never again, I had whispered. At the time, it felt like a wall of defense, a promise to never be left vulnerable. Today, it feels like something deeper. Not just a refusal, but a commitment to protect the life I was building piece by piece, paycheck by paycheck, choice by choice. What I've learned is that love without boundaries isn't love at all, it's surrender. And boundaries, though they may feel like rejection to those who have long crossed them, are actually the truest form of care. They say, "I will walk beside you, but I will not carry you at the cost of losing myself." So I sit tonight in my living room, the hum of the dishwasher in the background, a candle flickering on the coffee table. My diploma hangs in the entryway, my blueprints above the fireplace, each frame a quiet testament to years of saving sacrifice and resolve. And I finally feel whole in the space I carved out for myself. If you've ever had to choose between keeping your peace or pleasing others, I hope my story reminds you of this saying: no doesn't make you unkind. It makes you steady. And sometimes the most powerful gift you can give yourself is simply the right to keep what you've earned. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched something in your own life, I'd love for you to share your thoughts below. And if you haven't already, join me here for more stories like this.